Welcome, everyone, to our ESPN Esports Valorant program. That's right. Though this program is yet to be officially named, this is an official program. You will be seeing us every single week breaking down all things Valorant, whether it's roster moves, patch notes, upcoming tournaments, breaking them down, previewing them. All will happen here if it has to do with Valorant. You got Arda, Tyler, Jacob, Emily with you every single week. Before we dive into the news of the week, though, ladies and gents, let's talk about our own Valorant games. How have we been enjoying the game? Do we have any highlights? How has the last week been for Valorant for you, Emily?
I mean, I'm still bad. I'm having a lot of fun playing in like 5 stacks with friends, but I'm still pretty terrible. This is the first like FPS game I've played regularly since I think like 2009. So, but it's fun. I think if there's one thing I can always bring to the table in terms of commentary from within the game, it's that even if you suck, the game can still be fun. And
I think
I'm a
I'm with
prime
you in that
example of
one.
that.
I'm in that same boat with you, 100%. Tyler, how about you? You've been grinding this game a lot.
Yeah, it's been fun. Again, I suck. I mean, playing against like high iron, bronze, silver players. But this is my first FPS game. I never played any FPS game before this. I've always just been an RTS guy or a MOBA guy of League of Legends and Dota, and it's really fun. I am in lower elo. It's really easy to just pick up points and just grind with like Brimstone if they can actually just listen to you and you actually have people. I think the key to all of this, low stack, low elo, high elo, it's all about playing with people. If you're going to solo, it's going to be incredibly difficult. If you have people that you can actually talk to and communicate with and trust, you will win most of your games, especially in low elo when you're playing against people who are playing solo. But yeah, it's been great. I'm mainly playing Raze and Brimstone at this point, and then Cypher on Bind if I want to be a little bit tricky. But yeah, those are the three agents.
And you're rocking the Ares lately, huh? You're in the Ares meta now?
I mean, we'll talk about that with the T1 Invitational, but Brax and Team Brax and a lot of the players were bringing out the Ares instead of playing, the Spectre or Shoddy or even, going Bulldog. And I was like, okay, Ares. Because I think people looked at the Ares as a meme because Odin is such a ridiculous unit and everyone makes fun of people who play Odin. That people just kind of were like, oh, Ares,
hey,
it's a
come
heavy
on.
gun.
We have an Odin player right in this
I am
in
an
this
Odin,
lobby right now.
I am an Odin apologist for sure.
The king of the Odin. But yeah, no, Ares, like for holding angles and just the spray is really easy to control. It penetrates like nothing else. You can mow down people, especially in low elos where a lot of times 3 people will run at you at once in a line. Having something that can just penetrate so easily just mows them down. So yeah, if you're in a low elo, if you're in the bronze, silver, even gold, I would highly recommend the Ares. And we're seeing it with Brax and other top players that it's actually a thing. It's not just a meme. It's not just a pub stomper. It's actually something that's being used in high level tournaments.
Yeah. So I would say right now, if you were to make an all-star team out of our ESPN Esports department, you're adding our producer, Daniel J. Collette. You're adding Thomas Tishio, Tish, our producer. You're also adding Mark Kim, who works in our social media department. And you're adding Jacob as well. Jacob, you are definitely taking this the most seriously for your own personal grind out of all of us. You have a massive desire to get to plat. We all know this. How is that going?
So far, I've played very few ranked games. I think I'm something like six games. I am at I think Iron 2 right now. I need to play more. I've been moving house for the past week, which has been sort of the big thing. I drove 26 hours last week in a 36-hour time window last Wednesday and Thursday to move from New York to Austin, Texas. But I'm settled in. I'm trying to figure it all out. I just haven't played a lot. And like yesterday, I was playing. Well, I played a lot of Valorant, but I haven't played a lot of Ranked. Sorry, to be clear. So yeah, I'm like trying to get to the point where I'm feeling kind of comfortable with everything. I don't know. The rank system doesn't feel as good as Counter-Strike, I guess. So far, I like that I like the way the divisions work, but I don't. I'm not a huge fan of like the types of players I'm encountering in ranked so far. It is definitely way more like League of Legends than it is CS. In terms of people who are like really troll and also like mocking you and flaming you, and you can't give them any feedback or like have an actual legitimate discussion. I had a lot of fun last night though playing with some of our colleagues. That was enjoyable because we had a 5-stack and it was just like I could have fun with it. But I am trying to learn Cypher now. I've been playing Sage since the beginning of
Wow.
Valorant, but
Nice.
Does that mean
I'm
Sage
learning.
is
Does
open
this
in our
mean
game?
I can play Sage? Because I've been spamming Sage.
I
Oh,
was nice.
good.
I was nice enough to give was nice enough to give Daniel, our producer for this show, Sage last night, and I'm picking up Cypher to figure out how to.
Okay.
I play a lot of lurk anyway, so it's kind of useful the fact that I can just kind of stay on the other side of the map and get intel and try to push in. So yeah, I'm learning him. I need to be able to play more than one character anyway, so he is on my goal to learn right now.
So real quick for me, I've been playing with a lot of different people. Someone else who likes to lurk, Jacob, is Chris Puckett. I've been playing with him a lot, played with him last night. He's really good at the game and he loves to lurk. Like he loves to be roaming around, trying to find, like he's really good with that, just like you are in the game. Also been playing with a lot of the WWE guys like Austin Creed and Cesaro and Adam Cole. They're very much enjoying the game as well. There's a lot of people, like you can tell that there's a buzz around this game. We've talked about it a lot on this channel as well. I can only imagine that we're going to have so many interesting announcements coming up in the next few months surrounding this game. And let's start there. Let's start about team announcements. We know we were live on this channel when Sinatra made the move. If you missed that entire conversation, it is available on YouTube now /ESPN Esports. Also a VOD here, twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. But now we have some rosters developing. We have T1, we have Sentinels, we have Gen.G. So we're starting to see the foundations, Tyler, of these teams building and early adopters of all of these players. So when you look at some of these more complete rosters, how do they compare to you?
It's really difficult because there's only one real complete roster, and that's Gen.G. I mean, T1 has 3 players. They have Crashies, they have AZK, and they have Brax, but then they have, 2 more spots open, which they are, trialing and looking through players and a lot of discussions. And then Sentinels, they have 4 players, and they had, 4 of the 5 play in the T1 Invitational. But obviously, Dizzy was the fill in there. We don't know where Dizzy's going to go. Seems like Dizzy's going to go pro in Valorant, but we don't know if he'll go to Sentinels. Maybe he'll go to NRG with Asu. Who really knows where he's going to go? But again, so the really only
Can I interject and just ask, are you surprised that Dizzy wants to go pro in Valorant just because of how difficult it was for him to be a pro in Apex Legends?
A bit, but I also think because of the open nature of Valorant right now, I don't think there's no real league, right? It's not like he's signing up to go into a league format where his next 6 months to a year are now confirmed, right? If he joins a Valorant team for Energy or Sentinels, sure, he's signing a contract, but there's no official league. There's gonna be a lot of third-party tournaments, so I think he has a lot more time to relax. I also think that if he joins a team, he won't be the sole focus. Apex Legends, a 3-man group, so you have a 3-man team. He was, the poster boy of Apex. If he joins a team like Sentinels, Sinatra is going to be the poster boy. Sinatra is the player that people are going to talk about, or Shazam. Or if he joins NRG, he has Asu. He's not going to be, that he's not going to have all the attention onto himself. So I think the third party nature of how for at least the first year of Valorant's capacity is going to be like would make it a more, digestible format to go pro in than Apex that has, the official league and he has more attention on.
I also think to that note that there's a huge financial upside. Obviously, I did an interview. Yeah, I did an interview with Sinatra about this, and he was a little bit coy about sort of what money we're talking here. But he did talk, at least in broad strokes, about the sort of financial opportunity that exists here because Riot Games. Everyone assumes that Riot Games will make a huge financial boon in esports again with Valorant, like they have in League of Legends, right? So there are a lot of organizations betting big right now on it, and that means player salaries are enormous and probably, I think, ridiculous relative to a game that's not even out yet. We saw some of this in Overwatch, but not to the same extent, and certainly not as much money as we did in beta Overwatch. But yeah, I think there's a huge financial opportunity here that may actually supersede his streaming revenues. Because like Dizzy's like Dizzy's not like Shroud Ninja level streamer where he's gonna make millions of dollars doing it. He will make several $100,000 a year doing it. He will have a good income and a good life. But streaming is like if you're not one of those guys that gets a flat rate deal from Twitch or from Mixer or from YouTube, like it's a grind to keep streaming hours up to make all that money. And it may actually be a little bit easier for him to just sign a big fat Valorant contract and let it ride. So yeah, and I also think to Tyler's point, like I think people believe that Valorant will have a better esports scene than Apex, and like I say this as a platinum player in Apex. This is like my goal is to be plat in both Apex and Valorant, 2 shooting games at once. As someone who plays a lot of that game, the game's great. The esports scene is one of the most mismanaged things I've seen in all of esports. Screw you, EA, for doing such a poor job with a fantastic product. But nonetheless, yeah, I think that like everyone thinks Valorant has a much higher upside than something like Apex
Oh.
Legends. As much as I hate to say that.
Tell us how you really feel, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean,
fair enough. Fair enough. Emily, who do you think? I know we talked about this on our last live stream, but I want to get your thoughts for this program as well. The idea of which organizations are taking the best approach to signing players, right? In your opinion, based on what you've seen, who is taking the best approach right now?
So I think, I mean, like obviously this is a very small results-based analysis, but I know Tyler has a really good article about Gen.G's approach to the team that they ended up going with. And I'll admit that since I'm not a huge CS person, I did not know any of these players prior to seeing them in the T1 Invitational. So I can't even gauge on like how big they are in terms of, maybe like Jacob can chime in on that. But I think the big thing is that like I still believe like for the esports scene right now, I still believe that what it's looking like teams are kind of pivoting towards after these few major big signings that we saw, you know, the Braxes, the Sinatras, stuff like that, is that we're seeing people kind of starting to slow down a bit and take a look at the scene overall. I'm still a firm believer, and I know like I've repeated this several times now, like I'm still a firm believer that the best Valorant players are going to probably come from the game itself. And by that, I don't mean that they never will have played CSGO before, but they probably won't have been like amazing, you know, CSGO pros that are making the swap. I think it's actually going to be very few people making the swap who are going to stick around at like a really high level in Valorant, and you're going to see a natural like flow upward of talent from the ladder as more and more people play the game, and it actually goes through like its actual release later on this year. You know, that's where I'm going to see a lot of the talent coming from. So I think right now, like I thought Gen.G's approach was really, really good in terms of how they went about signing the team that they did have, and they performed really well in the T1 Invitational. I think there are certain players out there that are definitely still going to get picked up. I know like there's a Kiko discussion to come later on in the show. Like he's probably my favorite player who hasn't been picked up right now. But yeah, I mean, I think if you had to take a look at like what team did the best scouting, it probably has to be Gen.G. However, to Tyler's point, like we don't have any other complete rosters yet. Like this is in an incredible infancy, and it's only because now there's an expectation that everyone's going to be talking about it as an esport from the get-go that we're even really talking about how rosters are coming together at all. And to reiterate, I still think that within a year the scene is going to transform significantly, and you're going to have a lot of native talent coming up off the competitive ladder itself.
We're going to talk about that T1 tournament in just a second, but before we do, Jacob had a chance to catch up with Sinatra. That full interview is up at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. We're going to show you a clip right now where Sinatra breaks down how Sentinels went about picking their Valorant roster.
but in terms of your team, you have yourself, obviously, a former top Overwatch player. You have Zoms, a very successful Apex player in his own right. And then you do have Sick and Shazam. Shazam, obviously, known for a bunch of different things in CS, but Optic and Cloud9 probably top among them. And Sick is one of those people that like everyone always thought was very good in Counter-Strike, but really never landed on the team that could have, I guess, unlocked his potential, right? That would be the way I would summarize his career in CS. In terms of your team sort of being this diverse mix of players from different backgrounds, do you think we're going to see more of that, or are we going to see the T1 and maybe some other teams' route of just sign a bunch of Counter-Strike pros, throw them together, and hope for the best?
No, we probably won't go just like randomly sign people, but I mean, obviously, we want to like our fifth as a teammate and like a person, and obviously a skill. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna put a lot of effort into finding our fifth and go through a lot of like tryouts. There's not really like scrims going on, but we're just gonna play with them and see like how we like them. We have some candidates, but it's definitely not just like randomly look for like random CS players who played in Mountain Dew League or Pro or whatever, and then just sign them. Like we're definitely, we know that there's still some CS players that aren't as good as like random other people. So we're looking at all our options and we'll make a decision together, I'm sure.
How did this team come together? How did you all sort of get paired in this way with one another? Was that Sentinels management trying to put it together, or are you all sort of getting it together and then dealing with Sentinels to get on the team, or how did we get to this point?
I think there's 10 mans going on. So T1 has a Discord or something, like a private 10-man Discord of like really good players only or whatever. And then me and Zoms got in it or something. And then we played in 10 mans and I did really good. And then, dude, I don't know the exact story actually, but like I think in a 10-man that Shazam and Sick were in, like I did really, really insane. Like I like dropped a 34 bomb or something. And then after that, and Zoms and Shazam were already friends from like Counter-Strike 5 years ago or something like that. So they already knew each other and were already talking to each other. And then I did good in 10 mans. So and then Shazam and Sick are really good friends, and then they added me, and then us four like started like playing together, and then we just like started talking to orgs, and then that's how it started.
Yeah, so I spoke to Sinatra there. Thank you again for joining us. I actually found his team, or like their team, really interesting. Right, like when we were doing a little bit of reporting around this, Tower and I was, and Tower told me that it was Shazam and Sick that were joining this team. I was a little taken aback because, I don't want to discredit some of the players and their achievements that are joining these Valorant teams, but like none of these top guys we see right now in the early parts of Valorant, they aren't top Counter-Strike players, right? Like Hiko and Nothing and Shazam and Sick, they're all very talented players, right? But they are not the Elysias of the world or the Nitros of the world or Device, right? Like some of these other people that like when we've seen them play Valorant on stream and everything else, they are really good, right? Like those are the players that I think if they like transition, those would be the ones that would be getting these massive contracts, and I don't think they will, right? Like I don't see a world where like a top 5 a player for a top 5 Counter-Strike makes this transition unless, right, there's some like significant lucrative incentive involved. I do think there are a lot of players that are making this transition. Shazam, Sick, Pith, etc. Right? I saw our chat talking about Pith earlier. And also Skadoodle and Hiko and Brax. Brax is an interesting exception considering the circumstance that he was banned from Counter-Strike for match fixing and didn't really ever get the shot to prove himself. Right? Like everybody knew he was mega talented, but he never got the opportunity to show it on like a major level on a great team before what happened with iBuyPower happened. So I do think here there will be a lot of big opportunity for some of these players in Counter-Strike who were like either had transitioned to streaming fully or were sort of on their final legs of their competitive Counter-Strike careers.
We're going to talk about the T1 tournament in a second, but I want to follow up there. There was a question in the chat from Famous3K who said, when do you think the first Tier 1 players from CSGO will move to Valorant? I think it comes back to the economics there, right? Like, I guess how much are those top tier players making in CSGO versus how much of an increase they would want? Because I don't think that those players are necessarily burnt out from playing CSGO, which
No,
is
and
one
I
of the reasons, like
And-
Sinatra in your
and, like-
interview, that was the reason that he left. Was it wasn't a monetary thing necessarily. It was definitely a motivation thing.
I think it was a mix of both. In what he was saying, right? Like he was a little coy about like when I asked him head on about money, but like I'm pretty confident that his Sentinel salary is bigger than San Francisco Shock salary, and I think that it was the monetary gain was higher, but also he was burnt out of Overwatch. He was not having fun anymore in Overwatch. Counter-Strike, comparative to Overwatch, Apex, etc., Counter-Strike actually has a very healthy esports scene, and although there's been a lot of discussion about like teams not being able to make money, and that's why Flashpoint and ESL Pro League are restructuring, right, as these teams try to figure out how to make money. The salaries in Counter-Strike are pretty massive, right? Like they're probably the second biggest. Salaries per game across the board, below League of Legends, which are the highest.
Mhm.
And at that point, right, like if you're a top player and you're on Liquid or Astralis or Navi or whatever it is, you probably make pretty solid money, and you're also having fun because because Counter-Strike is a very healthy scene from a tournament perspective if you are a player.
Well, in the game itself, like I think, I mean, I really love playing Valorant. I'm probably not the best person to be speaking about how good it is to play as a pro because I suck individually. But I think another thing that has to be brought up is that, and we'll bring it up again when we start talking about stuff like map design and the game itself, right? Later on in the show, is that CS is not Valorant, and it's okay to like CS more than Valorant. It's okay to like Valorant more than CS, and they have like different, in my opinion, despite the fact that they are very similar, they have different draws to them. So like you are just gonna have players that like really really love playing CS, and they're not gonna leave.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for that Valorant has going for itself so far is that, and actually this is fitting considering the three people on this panel come from this background and not FPS background, and I'm the only one here with one. Like to the fact that like Valorant is gatewaying people into first-person tactical FPSs.
Mhm.
People who have only played League of Legends and have played other games. This is their first tactical FPS experience because it's a Riot Games game, and Riot knows how to market to their audience quite
Jacob,
well.
Are you saying that Call of Duty is not a tactical FPS experience?
Definitely not.
Are you
Oh,
telling
I'm
me-
teasing. By the way, that's a joke. I know it's not.
Hey, that was where I got my FPS start in Call of Duty, and I will throw much
Yeah.
shade at it. I will throw much shade at it because it deserves it because it's not in a good spot either right now. in
Jacob,
my
are you
opinion. But-
telling me?
I
Are
love
you
that.
telling me, Jacob, that Tetris is not a tactical FPS experience? Is that what you're
Okay,
telling
well,
me right now? Is that what you're telling me? How dare
Yes,
you?
no,
How dare
Tetris
you?
Tetris does not count, but that's my point, right? Like I think also to Emily's point that we haven't seen the best Valorant players and that they're probably some like 15, 16-year-old in China who's going to pop off when this game comes out, right? Like
Oh.
that's I think that's like
Definitely.
that's definitely the case, and that person's probably playing League right now to Tyler's point in previous shows. So I think that's the big thing that Valorant has going for it. CS is hard to get into unless you know people who play it regularly and can sort of bring you in to the door and help you out.
Let's talk about the T1 Invitational. This is the second one. This one was partnered with Nerd Street Gamers. The first Invitational, which happened on April 16th, that was won by Team Brax. They did not win this latest T1 Invitational. In fact, it was won by Gen.G, the team of relatively unknown players, but they were a cohesive unit, a team, and they impressed mightily, Tyler, in this very first tournament. I mean, all eyes on Gen.G now. They were really good throughout.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of, not to take anything from the victory, because they were quite amazing. I mean, EU, NA, wherever you want to look, I think if you look at like high tier play, they probably played the best and most cohesive we've seen a team play in Valorant so far. But again, we have to say that of the 8 teams in the tournament, they were the only one with a full roster. Mousebaz also, who seemed to be wanting to stay as a 5-man unit. They've been in discussion with other orgs, so that might be the next big pickup for a big esports org to sign up Wardell and those guys, because they seem like they want to play together. But I think Team Brax, when you look at Team Brax, you're like, oh, this team should obviously win. I made jokes about it on Twitter, like just hand them the trophy of Brax, ADK, Crashies, Elise, Skadoodle. And I think what we found out is that, yes, I think mechanically Team Brax was mechanically the best team in the tournament. Elige, by himself, even with no real chemistry of any of the players, had so many 1v3, 1v4 pop-offs where he just looked like on another level at times compared to some of the other players in the tournament, where he would be 1v3 and you would have, Puckett and Golden Boy just be like, okay, he's about to clean up. This is going to be, easy as can be. And he would do that. So I do think Gen.G deserves a lot of credit, especially player one, who kind of I would see as like their main star player currently. I don't think they have like a star like duelist or a star like breach player, but I do think him as the Brimstone, he kind of fits in that role of like that leader who kind of leads his 5-man pack around, and they're very cohesive with how they play. And player one was one of the first people to hit Valorant ranked, along with TenZ and a few others like Defron in Europe. So Gen.G, very impressive, very cohesive, and I think they have a very good future ahead of them if they keep improving. But I also want to make note that I think T1 is also in a very nice place, depending on who they could fill out with the final 2 spots. I do think they need to get those final 2 spots filled as big tournaments come up, because cohesion and chemistry is very important in this game. Elige was a monster. Elige and Brax were the 2 best players in this tournament, and the stats prove that, and they were monsters all throughout the tournament, but they didn't win because they weren't cohesive and didn't have the same chemistry as Gen.G. So playing as a unit and knowing how to play as a 5-man team is important in Valorant, especially with all the ultimates and the abilities and everything like that. You can't just have Elige destroy everyone.
Right. Now, that brings up a very good point. And I know I asked this earlier, Emily, to you. I want to ask a similar question to Jacob. Based on Gen.G's success, do you think that's a paradigm shift? Do you think other orgs that haven't necessarily been looking at star players to sign just yet, will they be looking at established teams now? Will they be digging deep into amateur tournaments, looking for 5-person units that are functioning well in order to make that their Valorant rosters? How do you think Gen.G's success is going to affect how other orgs approach this game and signings?
I think Emily or Tyler said this the other day. I can't remember if it was on a show or if it was just when we were talking amongst each other, that they're like, there's 2 different there's 2 different types of mentalities here. You can either go big like Sentinels and just pay a truckload of money back up the Brinks truck and pay out the butt to recruit all these players, or you can do the Gen.G method, and like the Gen.G method is safer, especially when we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And everyone has some financing problems ahead of them. I think broad stroke here, I think every single esports team has some level of financial issue ahead of them in the next year.
Mm-hmm.
How that will happen, there will be some that I think will collapse. There will be some that and this is not just a Valorant thing, this all across all esports. There will be some that collapse. There will be some that have to make some cutbacks, either minor or major. And I think that makes an interesting opportunity for Sentinels, right? Like Sentinels is an org that hasn't been majorly relevant in a while, right? Like they were the operating company for the LA Gladiators and Overwatch League in Season 1 and Season 2. They previously were Phoenix 1 in the LCS, but like other than Booga, no one really knows what Sentinels is. Unless you're like super hardcore into Apex. I was about to say, like, unless you're
XQC.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's the only reason you would know them. So this is like a big like batter up swing for them, right? The fact that like if Valorant hits and they have that team and those teams have they're really popular players and Sinatra and Zoms and some of the others, as well as very successful, right? And or they're betting that they will be successful. That's the big bet. Or you do the Gen.G approach, right? It won't cost you as much money. Players obviously are very good. A lot of those players have played together in Counter-Strike. No, they were not very good in Counter-Strike relative to the scene overall. Actually not very relevant at all in North American Counter-Strike. But nonetheless, they will be good in Valorant because there are transferable skills. I don't think the competition level in Valorant is very high right now, actually. I'll just go ahead and say it. I think we are far from saying what will be very good Valorant play, because the best players aren't playing Valorant right now, because the best Counter-Strike players are still playing Counter-Strike. And also there's a bunch of players, I was about to say, there's also a bunch of players who don't even have access to Valorant who are eventually going to be very good when we're talking from a year from now, right? So I think that the Gen.G approach is the safe approach. We will see teams who are trying to make safer bets, make those bets, because if it doesn't work out, you just go find another roster. You didn't spend a ton of money. You may had some success like winning this tournament rather than taking the Sentinels approach and trying to swing out of the park, just, and take advantage of people's like financial handicaps because of the pandemic, right? So I think that you can do it one or the other. I tend to think the Gen.G approach is kind of the more safer bet when we're in the middle of a pandemic where money is tight.
Speaking of teams, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we already have a champion from Brazil, from Twitch Rivals, right? Team Yetz, shout out to them. And I agree with you, Tyler. We'll talk about this later, but I think Brazil is going to be massive for Valorant. But let's save that. We got 2 clips from the T1 Invitational brought to you by Nerd Street Gamers. Let's look at the Hiko 1v4 first. Tyler, this
the best
is
play
pretty
so far
sick.
in Valorant.
Go.
Look at
Easily.
this. On site.
No, I just
looking
want
around.
Tap.
I mean, this is beautiful.
The spray control, it's immaculate.
The flick right at the end, just like, oh
Yeah.
my god.
Yeah.
Wait for it.
right
it.
here.
1, 2.
You gotta be kidding me. That was a double tap, by the way, on the spike,
So
right?
beautiful.
So he fakes the spike twice, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna start defusing until you find me.
I just
Like,
want to watch it again. Daniel, please keep this up. I just
This
like that.
is-
The flick from long into garage is just nasty. Like,
And
look,
I
the
said
first
this
fake
on-
out there, right, to try and
Yeah.
bait him out. Doesn't
he
get
checks
it.
garage.
Goes back.
He taps again. He actually holds. He gets nearly to half. He actually doesn't get to
Oh
half,
my
and then he flicks it,
God.
and then he does it again.
Oh,
And he has
see.
the sliver of just enough time to make.
And I
that
love how
defuse
he's
work.
like, what? That worked?
No.
That was how it ended.
I said this on Twitter.
Oh, my word.
I said, and everything you want to say about Valorant, is it overhyped? The graphics not pretty enough? Whatever you want to say. That clip alone and how much people interact with that. Clips like that, and Asu, who gets millions of views on his clips. This is why I think Valorant is going to be a good esport, maybe even a great esport, is because you show that Hiko clip to anyone. I'm showing, anyone, and they understand what's going on, and they understand how cool it is. From the sounds to the tension to the bomb about to go, everything fits. Even if you're not the biggest esports fan, you see that play and you understand what's going on, that this person just went 1v4 and he killed all the other players and he won the round. Congratulations. It's very easy to follow. Where compared to other esports, you see there's some, League of Legends to an extent, Overwatch especially, where I remember Bren actually posted when Sinatra retired, was like, hey, here's like one of Sinatra's greatest moments in Overwatch. And if you understand Overwatch, you watch that clip and you're going, wow, that was a really amazing play by Sinatra. But there was people in those comments who were like, I have no clue what went on there. What just happened? I have no clue what happened. It's just a lot of colors bouncing against each other. And
I will say, here's my example anytime I talk about this specific topic with people, right? So, like, I try to surround myself with people in my personal life that have nothing to do with video games, or at least don't have anything to do with esports, right? So my girlfriend has nothing to do with esports at all. My mom had never been to an esports event or never watched esports with me prior to this. Younger brother is the same. I took my mom and I took my younger brother to the Atlanta homestand, the Atlanta Overwatch homestand, and they were lost. And my mom has since watched League of Legends with me. She's watched Counter-Strike with me. And she like understands them a little bit more. The top-down camera on League makes it at least a little bit easier to understand. But honestly, like tactical shooters and fighting games are the easiest games to understand. And Rocket League, I think, is pretty straightforward. It's soccer with cars. Pretty simple concept. So I think that like that's the biggest advantage that all tac shooters have, Counter-Strike involved. And we can go back and say this a billion times. It is definitely true that this game sort of being a little bit more PG than Counter-Strike will ultimately help it get indoors that Counter-Strike cannot.
100%.
And so I think that like that's a huge deal, right? And so I certainly think that there's a world where I definitely see Valorant on television overall and being like a very digestible product more than some of these other games.
Mr. Rain Gaming makes a good point. Simple graphic design, light for most devices to play it is what will make competitive games great, keeps costs low. So that's a very good point there because that's Tyler, you've been mentioning this, right? You can play it on a potato, right? Like you've been saying that on previous shows. Like that's very important for
what League has going for it too versus Dota.
It's super important because like especially in the West, like to get Western players involved because I mean, at least in the U.S., not nearly as much in Europe. Actually, Europe is more of a PC culture, but like here, it's console, right? Like that's in order to play this game, if it can be played on the lowest settings possible, that's actually really, really good to try to get players in the US involved specifically because, you know, most people do play on consoles because it's just a more generally accepted, like, popular gaming thing.
Yeah, I think it's changing. I mean, that's something that like League has going for it. Like I played League on like a crappy $500 laptop when I first started in 2011 or 2012 for the first time, and so like I definitely think like they're taking that note from League of Legends. League of Legends can run on a toaster. That's why you have people that have like 5-minute wait times to get into a game. But nonetheless, like
Do you used to race the ping? Me and my friend used to race like who would have worse ping. Like when you could see the load in. I think they changed it so you like couldn't make fun of the person with bad ping or whatever. But
yeah. Now it's an overall at the bottom bar rather than like individual.
That's not
loading
nearly as
bars.
fun.
Let me reel this back in. We have one more clip from the T1 Invitational that I want to show. This was by far my favorite clip because I was like at the edge of my seat. Yeah.
Is the Wardell one?
I want to watch this all together, and I actually got comments from Wardell, which I will mention later. But let's just watch this and appreciate how dramatic this is. So this is the Wardell clip here. This is a 1v1. So it's Elige and Wardell against Elige too, by the way. So he puts up the wall, and there's Elige. So Elige is like, okay, well, I'm gonna throw. He stops diffusing to get the elimination and goes back, and look how much time is left. 0.04 seconds. So you're watching this in real time and you're hearing it, and you can assume in your head, no way he's gonna make it. So he stops diffusing to get the kill, goes back and gets the diffuse. Like one of the most dramatic plays I've seen in this game.
And you have to know Elige is coming for you. That's the scary thing, right?
And Elige misguesses. He misguesses the flash on Breach also. Yes, which is sort of
exactly
like that's he hits the wrong part of the wall. He doesn't hit the right part of the wall. He hits the left part of the wall, and Wardell is on the right part of the wall from his perspective.
Daniel, feel free to play that clip a couple more times. I want to read what Wardell told me about the play. I asked him, like, how did you know? Like, what was going on in your mind? And he said, so this actually started on B site. It was a 1v2, and he knew that if he could get one of them, it would rotate back to A. So he was able to eliminate the person on site. There was somebody up in heaven, and he knew they were going to rotate. So that's where it started there. He eliminated on site. Then they both rotated to A. So he says, quote, I was trying to wall him and then look for the site guy who's going to be covering. Oh, sorry, hold on. That was on B site. So he goes to half. If I hear him close to me, then I get off. If I don't, I stick it. Then he went to my left because there was a gap in the wall. I die either way. Time is low. You have to stick it. Might as well try. But it sounded like I had enough time. So he believed that he did have enough time, which I found very surprising there. So he was like, at the very least, I can remove him of his gun for the next round. But at best, I'll get the kill and I'll get the defuse, which he believed, which I still don't believe that he thought he had enough time in that moment.
I mean, he had no choice. He had no choice. He had no choice, though, right? Like
in that moment.
But look at the score. It's 8-12. Team Brax Elige. If Elige wins that round, the game's over. He had no choice. Wardell had to do it.
How many people imagine yourself in that moment? This is why I asked him. Imagine yourself in that. And Tyler, you and I have talked about this already. But like, imagine if you were in that moment. If you were Wardell, I'm gonna guess that 999 people out of 1,000 are gonna continue diffusing. They're gonna hope that the wall will give enough time.
I would go for the gunfight, but not win it.
You would? You're the one. You and Wardell are the two people.
I would definitely go for the gunfight, but I would.
Now the real question. I actually think he may have been able to stick it. Just with the mechanics of how he would have had to wrap around the wall just to be able to get vision on the angle. I would want to see it in like slow-mo to check that, but I actually think that he had enough time to stick it. I think he had that either way. Because if you look here, it depends on how close. Like I don't have the audio here right here, and like I would have to hear it myself. But like watch this, right? He has more than half there, and by the time Elige would have wrapped around the wall, I think Wardell could have stuck it and had it because he actually had like almost 3/4 of the way done by the time Elige got to that point.
Unbelievable. I
also
would
think-
never.
I think
in
you
a
could. I
million
think you could have
years
stuck
have
it. I
gone
think
off
you could have
this
stuck
fight.
it.
I think
That's
the coolest
crazy.
thing about this play is I think we'll continue to see iterations of this as players really, really become so much more comfortable with like audio cues and the exact timing
I
of.
mean, that's 0.04. It's
Yeah. Oh no, it's
Yeah.
nuts. But like, I
It's,
do
like,
feel like
unbelievable.
you
I
can't
do feel
time
like
that. That was
this is where the pros can like really like this is where we're gonna see the most dramatic improvement in terms of timing. Is like really getting down to like the millisecond of.
Well, it's also why we've seen some pros struggle to transition from other games because audio is not a huge factor in other games and in many other games, right? Like Apex is a huge deal, which is why I think like Asu and Dizzy are inherently sort of nice about it. Counter-Strike obviously a massive deal, but like audio like is not a big deal in a lot of other games some of these other pros are playing. It is in Call of Duty, but it isn't at the same time, right? Like because it's because of the pace is what I mean. Whereas in
Yeah.
Counter-Strike it's
No, that's fair.
everything. Um,
So
it's,
let's.
so yeah, I
yeah.
think like audio is super important. Yeah, I think he
Yeah.
had that play either way though.
Shout out to Wardell. Incredible drama there. Pulled it off. So what's coming up next, Tyler? We know that there are organizations putting on tournaments. We're seeing them pop up everywhere. What do you think is going to happen in the near future as it pertains to possible tournaments?
So launch is sometime in the summer. We don't know exactly when. A month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, somewhere in the 3 month range. But I do know that there are some big organizations looking to put together some Valorant tournaments. I mean, we're already seeing T1 do their NA tournament. Gen.G is going to be running a Korean tournament. Fnatic has probably the best European tournament we've had so
Yeah.
far. Europe has been really
super-
lagging behind
Super
NA.
excited about
NA is
that.
I actually feel like NA is like 3 steps ahead of Europe currently, and I'm sure G2.
We said the same thing about League of Legends. So.
Yeah, I mean, NA has to get in front early.
I think that's because a lot of the European Counter-Strike pros actually have not cared about Valorant. They've
Yeah,
played it, but they're
That's
not like
fair.
they're not looking to move over. A lot of the NA Counter-Strike pros are looking to move over. The dynamic there is that NA Counter-Strike teams are worse than EU Counter-Strike teams, so therefore they are probably not as well compensated as the European Counter-Strike teams, so there's less incentive. But yeah, that's the point. I think eventually we'll have a much more greater idea.
Yeah, I'm sure
but I would
G2
agree with that right now.
It's pretty obvious that G2 and Fnatic will be investing in teams. They're both very big on Valorant. Carlos loves Valorant. Fnatic obviously hosting a big tournament tomorrow, the biggest so far in Europe. Showcases that those two kingpin orgs will be going to. I'm sure Astralis / Origin will get into Valorant. Like, I'm sure it's going to come, but so far it's a lot been NA based. But yeah, there's big tournaments coming. Obviously, Riot has to sign off on them, so I'm sure we'll be seeing some organizations in the next few weeks or so kind of announce. I've heard from multiple sources that Riot is looking into doing their own summer invitational / series / tournament with orgs. So that would be really cool to kind of kickstart things. Obviously, we're not going to be getting any international tournaments, offline probably in the near future. Probably not until 2021, unless it's a Korean tournament or a Chinese tournament. So I would be excited if Riot hosts something. But yeah, last week a lot of teams were rushing to sign teams with the Sinatra signing, Sentinels kind of putting together most of their roster because there was an expectation that there'd be a few huge tournaments being announced by now or in this time frame, but it looks like those tournaments have been pushed back a bit. But I expect some pretty big tournaments to be popping up in the next 2 to 4 weeks. So there is going to be a lot of Valorant that we're going to be able to cover, and we're going to be seeing a lot of NA, Europe, Korean, and Brazilian tournaments, and I'm very excited.
And we're going to have a lot to talk about on our new weekly program. Yet to be named, but definitely every single week. Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific, right here, twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. Let's talk about the state of the game. Off the top of the program, we all talked about our own personal experiences. There was a question in chat which was directed to Jacob, but we can generalize it from Antidote that said, tell us about the Vanguard cheat detector. Is it trash? I have a weird experience with it. So I've experienced a lot of the, the error 23 or error 42 or 43. Yeah. So I've gotten a lot of that lately, and I've also gotten a couple, and I'm not cheating, believe me. I'm in no position to cheat. Trust me.
No,
I'm getting a lot of It's something to do with my graphics card. I have an NVIDIA graphics card, and there's some file
No,
there.
it's nothing to do with you, my dude. It's a problem literally universally across the board. It crashed me 3 times in one game the other night, and it crashed every single one of my teammates. And one of them got so mad he just didn't come back. So that sucked, and that was like my second or third ranked game. It's happened to a lot of people. I think that they mostly fixed it, but like there's a lot of concerns around the Vanguard anti-cheat. It is like a kernel level program and has a lot of access to your computer, which lots of people are very sensitive about that because also Riot is owned by a Chinese company, and obviously there's a lot of data security issues there that people are concerned about. I haven't seen anything like definitive proof on that level yet, more so conspiracy theory. But it's certainly like the fact that it runs all the time is a little concerning, and sort of like it can event watch your entire computer. But yeah, it's like
what level of conspiracy theory are we at? Is this a Facebook is listening to our conversations and curating our ads kind of theory, or is
like the
this
Chinese government is listening to everything you say on your computer, which
Got it.
it's a whole nother level. Yeah. Nonetheless, it is like very buggy across the board. I've had not just the 43 error. I've had where it like DQs me because it can't validate a file. I was like, what more do you want? I've given you kernel level access to my computer, you stupid program. Like, figure it out. And I'll give Riot some slack because it is beta, and this is like they haven't had to have this sophistication level of anti-cheat before, because League of Legends doesn't need it. But nonetheless, yeah, like lots of people like to cheat in FPS, aimbot, wall hacks, everything else. So like, it's definitely needed. There's just it is pretty annoying. They need to figure it out.
I know we talked about this a little bit, but solo. I know, Emily, you said this at the top of the program. Like, you won't play much solo queue. You enjoy this game more with friends, right? And I have to agree with you because I also find that, at least my personal experience, solo queue has been a little bit toxic, and I haven't been enjoying it as much as playing with friends. And actually, the executive producer of Valorant, Anna Donlan, has said the exact same thing. She has said that, unfortunately, comments that she has seen or even received is why she can't participate, or she won't participate in solo queue either.
I mean, I'm not gonna go and like trash solo queue because I think like it just has like a lot of inherent problems. All I'll say is that like I will not, and I know people have like supported me very positively on Twitter for, I guess, speaking out about this. So thank you. I mean, you can also flame me for it, whatever. I can handle getting flamed for being bad, but what I cannot handle is teammates refusing to communicate with you, and that happens every time I open my mouth. So until I get a voice changer to sound like a man, it's really hard for me to queue up with random people.
Yeah, that needs.
I mean,
to
this is not new
just unlucky. Yeah, like I mean, there's nothing I can do that's gonna fix it, right? So like, it's just something that I've had to deal with in everything where you use voice chat.
Just hit escape and report for negative attitude and verbal abuse, and hope for the best.
Yes.
I will say though
can I just
that
make
there
a quick
was
point, Jacob. Hold on. I think that the game is free to play, right? So everybody can play. It's very easy. There's a low barrier to entry to play this game. But there should also be a stricter enforced policy on bad actors. I think it's
you have to be really careful. You have to be really careful the line you walk. Riot has always been
happens every game.
Yeah,
honestly.
Riot has always been a
societal thing, and like I know that's really shitty to say, but like speaking as someone who gets a lot of really shitty comments for no other reason than literally opening my mouth and calling out some sort of map position.
That shouldn't happen.
Just sucks. I mean, of course it shouldn't happen, but what are you gonna do about it? Except
be strict about it and ban these people strictly.
I mean, Riot has done a little bit. Some people criticize them for going a little too ham on the way they've handled League of Legends. Not specific to like women and verbal abuse, but more so just like in general, right? Like the Tribunal was a huge meme, and there was a guy named Light that worked at Riot that would like. He was. I don't miss this guy because he like actually sort of was like turned out to be super weird. But nonetheless, yeah, like they've made examples of people publicly on chat forums and stuff about that. I don't want that to happen anymore. But I do think that like policing your game is important. So yeah, I think I don't know. There was a Monte Cristo tweet today about banning people who are negative actors more than cheaters. The Vanguard anti-cheat also isn't particularly accurate yet because I think they haven't figured out all the various different cheats you can do in Valorant. Because these people can move faster than they can as a big company. But yeah, I think that it's something they need to watch. And I definitely think first-person shooter communities more generally, especially because they have voice chat in the game where League doesn't, at least across the entire game and not just party. They're gonna encounter a lot more issues they've not faced in League of Legends in terms of people saying things to people over voice, and they're gonna have to have AI programs that recognize that. So, yeah, it's work in progress. A lot of new challenges for Riot Games, that is for sure.
And then you have Russia where they can't even talk. So, I mean, I think that's a big problem in Europe right now. I
Yeah.
mean, I was watching the Fionn stream yesterday, and it's every time it's just like, oh, it's the high Russian player can't communicate with him because they have an actual law where they can't actually use voice programs inside of games. So it's a myriad out of issues that I actually really do like the Valorant dev team, and I think they will do their best to combat what they can. But again, this is a universal issue that people are just scumbags.
I mean, for me personally, as long as I can like queue up with 5 friends
Yeah.
that are at about the same level and don't mind that I'm bad and competitive, that honestly solves like all of the problems for me. Because I can queue up with people who are at about the same level. I can communicate them without them saying some weird, creepy sex thing, and it'll be fine. Like that actually like honestly solves all my problems.
That's you as somebody who
enough.
enjoys the game casually, but for somebody like yourself who wants to take this game seriously and play as much as possible, like that can't. I know that this is a thing in every game.
That is the part. That actually is the part that sucks. Like if I actually want to get serious, which it's actually just generally really hard for me to get good at any game because I watch so many games and I really want to be kind of a more of an analytical voice, especially for something like League of Legends. I try to digest a lot of games and that just leaves a lot less time to play. However, yes, if I really did want to get good at the game, it would be a lot more difficult for me to get good at this game as opposed to something like League where I can, communicate entirely through pings and it's not a big deal that I don't use voice chat.
Speaking of communication,
I wanted to just say, like, it shouldn't be on you that you have to take the abuse and just like eat it, right? Like just to want to be able to play. And it shouldn't I mean, it shouldn't be
like a terrible attitude to have, and I'm not being like a good
that attitude is exactly what like we should not want.
You just have to learn to deal. Yeah,
it's like I was about to say that attitude is like not the attitude we want for girls, like younger girls to have that are wanting to play games like this, right? Like we shouldn't. You've played games for a long time. You've dealt with this in various different games prior to Valorant. So like it's not really a thick skin. It's just like you've gotten used to having to deal with it, and like, but it shouldn't be that way anyway. So
yeah, it shouldn't be that way. I want my daughter to have a good experience playing video games. I want everyone who has any female in their life to have a good experience. Like anyway, speaking of communication, I'm sure we could talk about this topic for hours on end. We do have more to talk about on the program, however. Communication. The developers have been very good with communication. We have gotten a myriad of updates on the game, and we have gotten weekly check-ins from the developers. It's been very, very good. Tyler, you've talked with the developers. You've seen this game develop. They're also developing metas. It seems as though we are starting to see a lot of the same agents and a lot of the same combinations. What are you noticing?
Well, it seems right now that there are essentially, I would say, there's two agents that have to be played no matter what. Sage by far has to be played always. Like there's no composition where she doesn't work. There's no map where she doesn't work. There's no time where Sage doesn't make sense. Cypher also has kind of fit into that role too, where and now it seems like every team has to have a Cypher. And beyond that, it seems like most games, I would say probably 80% plus, have a Brimstone and a Breach in it, and those four kind of are the center of a team with their utility. And then you add the fifth player is usually generally a duelist, so you have either your entry essentially where you have
Omen,
Phoenix,
Raze.
Yeah, mostly Phoenix. It looks like Phoenix is the destined duelist for most teams, or we're seeing a lot of if teams just want to go full utility, full recon, then they just get a Sova, and it's
Sova,
Sova, Cypher, and then Brimstone, Sage, and Breach, and you just play that composition. But right now, it's fine. Like, I don't really mind it. There's 10 agents. We're gonna get 2 more, hopefully, quite soon with the launch. So I don't see this game being an Overwatch style thing where we get maybe an agent every 5 months. I trust in Riot where we'll probably get a steady stream of agents that will mix up the game's meta. And because of how committed they are to balancing the game, I think that by like 2021, 2022, we might have, 30, 40 agents. So I think right now people overreacting to things. We just need to relax. Ray's got nerfed. Ray's is now kind of a pub stomper, and she's used in certain situations if you want to use her in the Def Quartet of Brim, Cypher, Sage, and Breach. But I think the meta's in a fine place. I don't think there's any agent that needs to be necessarily nerfed. I think people are looking at Viper that she needs a buff possibly. I think
Yeah.
Viper is very situational. We have an interview later, or we have a clip later of me talking to TenZ, who's probably seen as the best Viper player right now in the world, or the most well-known Viper player in the world, alongside Defron. So, very situational agent, but I think pretty much I think the meta is in a pretty decent place. I don't think there's any agent that makes me want to tear out my hair. And I'm like, I know Sage can be annoying, but I think her importance will change as more agents are added.
Is DeFran close to Valorant right now in rank?
He is Valorant.
He is
Yeah.
Valorant in
He's
rank.
amazing.
Wow.
Defron, I think Defron, pound for pound, is probably watching his stream. He translates this game so well. He's so good. Like, watching his stream, his aim is next level. Like, if he wants to go pro in Valorant, he could get a big contract tomorrow. Like, I don't know if he would, because obviously he had the issues in Overwatch League where he was on the Atlanta Reign for like 3 months, and he was like, "This is not for me." But his skills are absolutely terrifying.
He's entertaining too, right?
he's
Oh
entertaining.
man, do we have any entertaining characters among the players in Valorant right now? Like DeFran would be like the most charismatic player.
Sinatra.
Defron.
Like super
He can be-
troll and
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
I think Defron, though, is like, if you want to watch a stream with someone whose aim is next level
Okay.
and is a pretty humorous guy, I'd go Defron. Defron, yeah, he's Valorant, even though he's been playing against a lot of
We have not
hackers.
seen the Dr. Disrespect Ninja or Shroud of Valorant. I know Shroud plays in Valorant, but
no
none of those
really-
guys no like major entertainer has come out of this game yet.
Yeah, currently it's a lot. Like, Valorant's view count is still insane. Like, it's still #1 on Twitch every single day. But it seems like instead of having like a Ninja or Shroud that kind of just has 100K every day, it seems like there's a bunch of people with 10K, 20K, and it's more of a spread around batch.
Oh,
of
that's
people.
it?
I know, 20K. That's such
Oh
a terrible
man,
number.
just shut it down. Delete your account. 20K, you failed.
To the meta point, I just wanted to say that I think, like, to Tyler's point that he made previously, I actually do really like where the meta is now. I don't think it has to be super open and insane. I agree that Viper kind of just feels bad because right now she feels like a bit separate from her team itself, with what her abilities do. However, like, I really liked what we saw in the T1 Invitational with teams iterating different things on different maps, especially with the Phoenix on Haven specifically. And like, I finally think we're really starting to see teams look at the core that we've talked about previously and that Tyler just brought up, and then tweaking it based on map or like player skill, which is kind of what I always like to see from a meta, because that's a good jumping off point for other teams trying to come up with solutions around it.
Jacob, how do you feel about, like, Anomaly? One thing there is he's doing a lot of reruns, right? How do you
Yeah.
feel about that from a moral perspective, but also from a monetary perspective?
I mean, do what you want to do, but I don't know. Like, I don't anticipate anyone to stream all the time, but there is like significant financial incentive to do it, like to be live all the time. We were literally talking about that earlier in the show, that if you are not one of the like tier 1 or I guess like S+ tier streamers and like Ninja Shroud, Dr. Disrespect, Dr. Lupo, etc., where you get the flat rate paycheck from a major streaming company or streaming platform, then there's like absolutely no reason you shouldn't be live all the time. I think it's kind of crappy to do that, honestly. Like, but they're like the way that the system works is you're incentivized to be live at all times.
Yeah, I mean, look, some people are trying to monetize by even putting rerun on the screen, like sort of hoping that the algorithm will pick it up, play a VOD, get some sort of monetary benefit from that. I mean, to me, if that's part of the rules and it's acceptable, then it's acceptable. Would you do it yourself? I don't know, but
I mean,
yeah.
Anomaly has over 50,000 Twitch
Our
subs.
chat seems to think that it's been shut down, so maybe
Yeah,
it has been.
I know. It has been shut down. It got shut down.
But
about
isn't
a
there a
week
thing
ago.
where Twitch is allowing you to do it if you say it's a rerun?
No,
Like there's a rule in
no,
place, right?
no.
No, I
It
think
got
that
shut
I think that's only for like esports matches, like ESL's channel,
got it.
where you're rerunning old tournaments.
Anomaly kind of shut it down because what happened was Anomaly was doing it 24/7 drop streams. He got over 50,000 subs, which is a boatload of money. That's about over
Times 5.
200,000. Yeah,
Well, as a Twitch partner myself, the flat rate here is it's 50% of the income. So you do your 50,000 times $5 a sub, and then you split that in half, and that would be the monthly income.
so over
125
100,000.
grand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a
so
lot.
not bad. But
For
also,
reruns.
so yeah, Anomaly is still getting crazy numbers. But what he's doing now is he's doing 12-hour marathon runs, and he's doing 16-hour Twitch streams, which is fine if you want to do that. Like that's what XQC has been doing for the last year, and which is why XQC is one of the biggest streamers in the world right now, is because he is always on, he's always streaming, and he's consistent. So if you want to do that, then fine. But yeah, they did change the rule because of Anomaly and because of all the rerun streams, which is good for the general health of the Valorant section
Agreed.
of Twitch.
Tyler had an interview earlier with TenZ. He is signed with C9. He is C9's latest Valorant player. And here are his thoughts on being the very first Valorant ranked player.
Speaking a little about the current landscape of North America into Valorant, you were the first player to actually achieve the Valorant rank in Valorant. Can you just talk a little bit about that moment of you kind of getting to that point and just the grind of the rank? Because when rank came out, everyone was basically rushing to get to the Valorant rank first. You were the first one to do it. Just take us through kind of that day and the journey to actually get there.
I wasn't initially going for Valorant at first, but after I think I got Immortal 3 and I kind of saw that nobody else was Valorant, I was like, oh, I can actually make Valorant. And so I was just queuing games for the rest of the day until I eventually got it. And I think I got it in 2 days after rank came out.
And the game you got it in was like a 32 kill game or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. I was just popping off in that game.
How do you feel about the rank system? I think a lot of people right now they're having a bit of a it's decisive. It seems like it's very easy and it doesn't take forever to grind into the top levels or to jump a level or two. But it seems like there's a lot of people complaining that it's not as precise as they would want it to be. How do you feel about the rank system currently in Valorant?
I would prefer if the ranking system was a little bit similar to League, where you have the LP or you can see your progression physically and you're not kind of playing games without knowing if you're going to rank up or not. So I'd really like to just see like physical progression. And then yeah.
You don't like the whole like, oh hey, your ranking greatly increased. You don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
It's just hopefully I'll rank up sometime in the near future.
Yeah, so yeah.
Let's talk about what's coming up next before we go here on our now weekly Valorant program here at twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. We saw a launch in Korea and Brazil. We already have a Brazilian champion crowned on Twitch Rivals. So I think Emily and Tyler, Emily, let's start with you on this. These are two regions that are really crucial to the success of Valorant, and I think so far so good.
I mean, I think people always underestimate Brazil a bit. I don't really know why, but like esports are incredibly popular in Brazil, and we've talked about this previously, but they're also televised, which I know everyone's always like, why do you have to have it on television? This is esports, which actually I somewhat agree with. However, this also just is a good indicator of just how popular and how like widely accepted esports are in Brazil, and the fact that people who don't play them will just watch them. Additionally, Brazil has a remarkable history in CS, even outside of like the more recent CS players and teams that we kind of talk about over the past like 5 to 10 years. They have a history in CS Source. A lot of Brazilian league, like the first kind of wave of Brazilian League of Legends players came from CS. So, you know, like I think this game is going to be massive in Brazil, and I know a lot of people like to dunk on Brazil for whatever reason, or a lot of League of Legends fans do, I guess, just because their League of Legends teams aren't particularly great. And they have a lot of like infrastructure problems that will kind of keep them region locked. But I don't see the same thing happening with Valorant, and I do think that there is a very real chance that we will see some incredibly good Brazilian Valorant teams.
So I just want to say, coronavirus, please go away so I can go to Brazil in November to watch some Counter-Strike. Thank you.
I still have my visa. I can go in for the next 8 years. I'm set.
If actually on the topic of Brazil, I actually think if a tier 1 player in Counter-Strike would switch over, I'm not saying it is happening or there's even rumors of happening, but I could definitely see like a top Brazilian player, because does seem like Brazil's going all in on Valorant. Like right now, the top 3 Valorant streams are all Brazilian, and the Brazilian teams right now aren't doing the greatest in Counter Strike. So
That's true.
what would happen, Jacob? Let's just again. There's no rumors of this. There's no. I'm telling you this right now.
Remove.
We're spitballing.
Do not
Just
remove
spitball.
Jacob, we're ready to clip this.
No, do not.
Okay.
Tyler's
Hey,
waiting
hey,
to clip this.
I will-
We're
wait,
putting
wait,
it on the
I
Valorant
will-
subreddit.
I will do the thing that I always do in these moments. Guys, aggregators. This is not Jacob Wolf reports. This is Jacob Wolf talks hypotheticals. Please do not aggregate what I say, because this is a hypothetical. So,
in a world, let's say a Cold Zera or a Fallen.
let's remove Cold Zera from this equation because he's actually on a like an international team, right? Let's talk about somebody from like Furia or MIBR or
like
someone,
a Fallen.
or like a Hen1. Henny, like Henny, Lucas,
Tyler, in the chat, Zoref says this is already on Twitter, Reddit, and HLTV. Continue.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
let's say one of those players or teams, just like, because in South Korea and China, or not China, Japan, the best Japanese Counter-Strike team and the best South Korean Counter-Strike team have already gone to Valorant. What happens if a Fallen says, I'm going to go create a Valorant Brazilian team? What would you think would happen then, Jacob? How big of a move would that be if a tier 1 Brazilian player?
I mean, they have other. So I actually don't see it far-fetched that maybe not he himself transitions to Valorant, but like Fallen is involved in like Gamers Club and a bunch of these, like, which is now owned by Immortals, right? Like he's involved in a lot of these. He has like Team Yeah, I believe, which is like another Brazilian team that him and like a bunch of FNX and some of their other teammates are invested in, if I'm not mistaken. Like a tier 2, tier 3 Brazilian Counter-Strike team. There's not like, it's not far-fetched for me that like all these things that Fallen is involved in, right? Like it's sort of outside of his MIBR playing career, like that those things could get involved in Valorant. And like he has been the one player that like everyone looks to in FPS games, particularly in Counter-Strike in Brazil. Right, like young players, he's finding people. If you remember, actually, what is now mostly Furia, but what was originally what became Tempo Storm and then Immortals, etc. That team came because Fallen did a tournament in which the winner, he would help pay for their visas and their accommodations to come to the U.S. and then they were signed by Tempo Storm. So like, I don't think it's far-fetched to see like Fallen give back to the Valorant Brazilian community. Right, like even if he doesn't make the switch himself, but I think that like to Emily's point, this is a country that's very prideful about their FPS competition, not even just in Counter-Strike, but across the board, right? So I think that like we will certainly see Brazilian pride exude from Valorant as more competitions continue. Also,
Brazil is a very proud country in general for any sport or competition.
Please
Soccer,
come to
MMA.
Brazil.
Oh yeah,
I-
Brazil
I-
is
Brazil
passionate.
is so fun.
I have a question
life.
for the room. Kind of
We'll end on this, but yeah, go ahead.
I wanna let's make a prediction right now. We can look back on this in a year. Episode 49 of whatever this show is gonna be called. A year from now, what region will be stronger in Valorant? South Korea or Brazil? Who will be better?
Woo!
Make
South
your
Korea.
bets.
South Korea. I think South Korea. I'm going South Korea.
I'm also going South Korea because
Yeah, I'm gonna say
a
South.
Korean
I'm gonna say
fan.
Brazil's gonna be competitive. I think they're gonna be as competitive, if not more competitive, than they are in Counter Strike. But I think South
So-
Korea is gonna be the. Emily, I want to hear what you have to say.
I know I always do like these weird like shifting the goalpost things in these arguments because I try to find like loopholes. Like when I made myself a Chinese scion who owned billions of dollars. But what like in terms of success, I'd say which region is going to be better. You'd have to go South Korea simply actually based on infrastructure. Like as someone who's covered CBLOL since 2014, which is the Brazilian League of Legends tournament, there are so many actual physical internet infrastructure issues that are part and parcel of a lot of Brazil's problems. And if you think about even the best Brazilian teams, like what did Fallen's initial roster have to do? Like that Kaboom Cade roster, they stayed in Aspen and streamed just for money to qualify for the Cologne qualifier. And that's kind of where I first started hearing about that CS team, right? And you need a way to get out of Brazil eventually just because of the infrastructure issues. So while I think, again, depending on the the outlook of Valorant Esports, since it seems like it's going to be a lot more open and less region locked, I can see a Brazilian team easily being one of, if not the best Valorant teams in the world. However, as a region, I think South Korea is always going to be stronger because their internet infrastructure and their PC their PC bong culture in general is just so built in for people to immediately be able to play PC games on incredibly high speed internet with very little money.
There's two things that need to happen here. I agree with Emily. The first is coronavirus is settling down in South Korea, which means that PC bongs will be open, which means when this game comes out in the summer, it will be high played. And then also, Valorant needs to take over PUBG in South Korea. PUBG is still the most dominant shooting game in all of South Korea. Blue Hole is a South Korean company. I've been to their office. It's like obviously they're very plugged in when they can just walk out the door and walk down the street to a PC bong and like start polling players and sort of being hands on there in a way that many other companies cannot. So I think South Korea. I think that Brazil is actually quite like if any of those top Counter-Strike players or even like tier 2 Counter-Strike players make the switch, they will instantly probably be much better than players from South Korea because South Korea doesn't have very good teams in Counter-Strike. Like MVP made the switch, right? But they're not great. But yeah, like I think that Valorant will be a much bigger deal in South Korea because Riot is a much bigger deal in South Korea than, say, Valve in Counter-Strike. So I would give the edge to South Korea as a region, although I think in the short term, Brazil will be better.
Do you think, to follow up on that, based on how seriously the PUBG pros took our tournament and how they are in general, do you think that we can extrapolate that to the general population such that PUBG fans in South Korea will in fact gravitate to Valorant?
Maybe. I will say the one thing that PUBG has going for it in Asia is that it is really good on mobile. And so people like to play it on their commutes. Because unlike the New York subway, which I've had to deal with the past 2 years, you actually have an internet connection. You have the internet connection when you ride in a train in China or South Korea. So you can continue to play while you are on the train.
Hey.
PUBG Mobile is actually a huge deal. It's part of the reason people are so engaged even in the PC bong. So that is the one thing that they have going for them. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see top South Korean PUBG pros try to make the switch.
There will be no besmirching of the New York Transit subway system on this
I would
program.
not take it right now, but
Emily
yeah.
and I know very well that there's even a Call of Duty League team named after that subway system. Okay, so
I mean, at
it's
least
very
New York has
popular.
a subway system.
Fair enough.
Heyo.
That'll yeah, exactly. That'll do it for us here on our very first weekly Valorant program. We might have a name for you next week. We'll let you know next week. But what we do know is that this show will be on twitch.tv/ESPN Esports every single Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're not following this channel, please go ahead and hit that follow button. We have live programming basically every single day. Twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. Tyler, Emily, Jacob, I'm Arda. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week.